A wealthy, highly educated Jewish philosopher was living in Egypt at the exact same time as Jesus of Nazareth. While Jesus was walking the dusty rural roads of Galilee, this man was walking the polished marble floors of the greatest intellectual city on earth. He never met Jesus. He never heard him teach on the shores of the lake. He never witnessed a single moment of his life or ministry. He never read a gospel account, and he died long before any of those accounts were ever written down or circulated. He knew absolutely nothing of the carpenter from Nazareth. Yet, this one man provided the exact vocabulary that would define who Jesus was for the next 2,000 years. He built the linguistic framework that later generations would use to explain the nature of God. How does that happen? How does a man entirely disconnected from the historical Jesus end up shaping the theology of the entire Christian world? This is the mystery we are looking at today. We're not here to accuse anyone. We're not here to tell you what you must think. We are here to look at what is actually there in the historical record. We are simply going to follow the evidence wherever it leads. Imagine waking up in the first century. You begin your day exactly as your ancestors did in the land of Judea. You recite the Shema. You declare the ancient, unshakable truth of Israel from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God. Yahweh is one. You honor the Torah. You know in your very bones that the God of Abraham is entirely singular. The Hebrew word used is echad. It means singular, incomparable, outside of any category. One person, one center of will, purpose, and consciousness. There are no partners. There are no divisions within the Almighty. This is your foundational reality. But then you walk out your front door and you step into Alexandria, Egypt. You are not in a quiet Galilean village. You're in a massive, thriving metropolis that is running entirely on the ideas of Plato. It is running on Greek philosophy. The legacy of Alexander the Great and his conquests from 3 centuries earlier have completely saturated the world. This is the heart of hellenization. Alexandria was the intellectual capital of the ancient world. It housed the great library, hundreds of thousands of scrolls containing the greatest scientific, mathematical, and philosophical thoughts of humanity were stored there. And nestled within this Greek intellectual powerhouse was a massive Jewish community. Generations of Jewish families had lived here since the city was founded. They spoke Greek. They read the Hebrew scriptures translated into Greek, the Septuagint. You did not choose this tension. You were simply born into it. You are a citizen of two entirely different worlds, and they are colliding in your own city every single day. This was the daily reality for Philo of Alexandria. He was a devout, deeply committed Jewish man. He loved Moses. He kept the law. But he was also a profoundly educated intellectual. And he loved Plato in equal measure. Philo looked at the brilliant, towering intellect of the Greeks. He saw their deep philosophy. He saw their relentless search for meaning, for the origins of the universe, for the ultimate reality. And he firmly believed that Moses had already said everything the Greeks were reaching for. He just had to prove it to them. The Greek intellectuals often looked down on the Hebrew scriptures. They thought the stories of a God who spoke from burning bushes and parted seas were primitive. They preferred abstract concepts. The unmoved mover, the first cause. Philo was not abandoning his faith by engaging with them. He was not walking away from the God of his fathers. He was trying to translate his faith. He wanted to explain the God of Israel to the Greek-speaking intellectual elite in a language they would respect. He wanted to show them that the Hebrew God was the true first cause. But to do that, to connect the invisible, unapproachable God of Moses with the physical world of the Greeks, he needed a bridge. He built his bridge using a word the Greeks already intimately knew, a word loaded with 600 years of intense philosophical history. The Logos. To understand what happened next, you have to understand the baggage this word carried. Around the year 500 BC, a Greek philosopher named Heraclitus of Ephesus first elevated this term. For Heraclitus, the universe was in constant flux. Everything was changing. But there was a rational principle governing the chaos. He called it the Logos. He associated it with divine fire, a cosmic reason that ordered all things. Centuries later, in Athens, the Stoics took this concept and expanded it. For the Stoic philosophers, the Logos was the active, rational principle of the universe. It was the soul of the cosmos. It was the divine spark of logic that gave form to unshaped matter. When a Greek intellectual heard the word logos, they did not think of a Jewish prophet. They thought of the invisible force of cosmic reason. They thought of a divine emanation. This is the word Philo chose when he wrote about how the entirely invisible, unapproachable God of Israel interacted with the physical world. He used this exact Greek term. He called the Logos an instrument. He called it God's blueprint, the pattern used by the great architect to build the universe. He even occasionally used a phrase that sounds absolutely shocking to our modern ears. He referred to the Logos as a second God. Let that sit for a moment. Not as a theological statement, as a historical reality. To a later Roman reader, centuries down the line, a second God sounds exactly like a partner. It sounds like an ontological equal. It sounds like a second person sitting on a throne next to the Father. It sounds like the beginning of the Trinity. But Philo was a first-century Jewish man. He was not writing in 4th century Rome. To a Jewish mind, a second God did not mean a second deity. It meant a delegated agent. It was the ancient, foundational Jewish concept of Shaliach, the authorized sent one. The rule of Shaliach was simple and absolute. A man's agent is as himself. Think of the king and the royal signet ring. When the king's agent carries the ring, he carries the full authority of the monarch. When the agent speaks, the kingdom hears the king. But the agent is never the sender. The ring is not the hand that wears it. Philo called the Logos the firstborn son. He called it an intermediary, a bridge between the Creator and the creation. But it never was the Creator himself. Do you see what's happening here? Philo was taking the purely Jewish concept of divine agency. He was taking the concept of the Shaliach, the authorized representative of Yahweh, and he was dressing it up in Greek philosophical clothing. In Philo's mind, the Logos acts for God. But the Logos is not God. Philo never confused the two. He held the tension beautifully. He never crossed the absolute line between the Creator and the things that were created. He kept Yahweh absolutely supreme as the one and only true God. And he kept the Logos entirely subordinate as an instrument. He lived his life and he died a faithful Jewish man. He recited the Shema until his final breath. So, we have to ask the critical question. If he kept God supreme and he remained fiercely Jewish, why does he matter to our investigation? Why are we spending an entire episode looking at him? If he didn't believe the Logos was literally Yahweh, what is the problem? Because he left behind a vocabulary. He left behind a set of words, a set of conceptual categories. And the moment that word, Logos, was used in the wider Greek-speaking world, without Philo there to explain it, a monumental shift happened. Every educated Greek reader heard 600 years of Greek philosophy echoing behind that word. When they read about the Logos, they did not hear the Jewish foundation underneath. They did not hear the law of agency. They did not hear the concept of the Shaliach. They heard Plato. They heard the Stoics. They took entirely Jewish documents written by Jewish men about a Jewish Messiah, and they began reading them with Greek minds. They read their own philosophical baggage back into the text. They turned the authorized human agent of God into a literal, ontological, pre-existing cosmic force. Philo of Alexandria opened a door between two worlds. But the vocabulary he introduced did not come with a warning label. The people who picked it up centuries that followed were not starting with Moses. They were starting with Plato. Someone else walked through that door. A generation of Gentile, Greek-trained theologians, and they did not look back. They carried Philo's vocabulary straight into the councils of Rome. The full series starts at episode 1. If you want the complete journey, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And the next video is right there. Walk in truth.